just because someone has a disability doesn't mean they owe everyone around them what their story is. They don't have to answer to people. And I feel like in this day and age of, oh, we need to be polite, we need to be nice, and there's the coined term of a nice disabled person, oh, let me answer all your questions. But then shouldn't they be able to live their life how we do? They already live their life so differently. So why do they have to answer people's curiosities? They're not a curiosity. That was back when they had freak shows. Hunter would have been a part of a freak show back in the day when they had these freak shows and they were considered curiosities. That is not what they are. If you want to educate yourself, there are many ways to do that besides asking my kid when he walks into an ice cream shop.
Hello, and welcome to Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between podcast. This podcast is about exploring the grief that occurs at different times in our lives in which we have had major changes and transitions that literally shake us to the core and make us experience grief. I created this podcast for people to feel a little less hopeless and alone in their own grief process as they hear the stories of others who have had similar journeys. I'm Kendra Rinaldi, your host. Now, let's dive right into today's episode. Thanks for joining us today. Today, I have Rosalie Mastaler. Yes.
Yeah. You got
Rosalie
it.
Mastaler. Yay. It's funny because right before I started recording, I asked Rosalie how to pronounce her last name so that I wouldn't mess up on that. And then I started recording and I messed up on her first name. And then here we are recording again. And now, okay. I nailed it
It
with a little
happens.
hesitation,
Yeah.
but I nailed it. Rosalie is a writer. She's a musician, a crafter, a mother, a wife, and a passionate advocate. And we'll be talking about all these different roles that she has, but specifically, a lot of our conversation is going to be around the aspect of being an advocate, of educating people regarding the disabled community and finding joy in that journey. So, welcome, Rosalie.
Thank you, Kendra. I'm so happy to be here and just to be able to share a message and to widen our platform. I'm always grateful for that opportunity.
Yeah, all that aspect of widening platform, it's so important because I was even talking with some friends of these aspects of cross marketing, quote unquote, of just
Mm-hmm.
really like the different people that we know and that reaching out this other public and other people that need to hear this, right? So
Mm-hmm.
any opportunity that we have in order to share our story, where even if it's one person listening
Yeah.
ends up having this connection or feels related, that they relate to your story, then that already right there has been mission accomplished kind of thing.
Yes.
So
It's worth it. Mm-hmm.
it's awesome. So before we started recording, we were talking about the weather. Right now we're recording in January, of course. Oh, February. What am I saying?
Oh
End
gosh,
of
yeah.
February here.
It's already almost March.
But almost March. And when you guys listen to this, probably down,
It will be
further
March.
down the
Yeah.
line, because of the editing time that it takes. But we're talking about the weather because we're dealing with the same weather. We're both in Texas. So
Mm-hmm.
let's talk about that. You mentioned you just recently moved to Texas. So, or at least to the Austin area.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about your life a little bit. Tell me about your family dynamics and how it is you guys ended up in
Yeah,
Texas.
so born and raised in California. So I feel like a California girl through and through because I lived there up until only 3 years ago. So my whole life has been spent in Southern California, basically almost in
Where in
one
California?
town.
I
Um,
lived there, so.
okay, well, I grew up in
Mhm.
Apple Valley, which is a little town in San Bernardino County. That's where I met my husband, and
Uh-huh.
we were high school sweethearts. And we got married young. We were just babies, 21 years old, and we didn't have our first child until a few years later. I was 25 when I had Hunter, who I
Mhm.
know we'll talk a lot more about. And then I have two boys younger than him, ages 8 and 4. And yeah, and we were brought out to Texas. My husband had a career change. He was in law enforcement for about a decade, a little over a decade. And then he switched careers to aviation, and he's now running a flight
Mhm.
school here in Texas. We're just north of Austin.
Oh, I'm gonna have to get your number. My husband loves to do those games. He flies, on his
Oh, yes,
computer.
the
So
simulators,
even
yeah.
yeah, even for his birthday, I thought I gave him a card and it said this or that. Like you could choose one of these gifts, either like
Uh,
a session like a flight, session like a real one,
yeah.
or like this grill thing that he won. So he picked the grill for now, which I was kind of glad because there's some nervousness I get too
Yes,
with the idea
yes.
of actually. So I could imagine,
Yeah.
was that for you too? The fact that he is running in aviation, was there
Yeah,
a little bit of that?
there are some nerves, especially if the weather is bad. I think that
Mm,
there was one time a storm was coming in and I knew he was flying that day and I was really nervous. But honestly, compared to police work, it's
right.
like nothing. So, I mean, there's still definitely some nerves with it. I haven't flown with him yet. I just have some anxiety with that. I think just with everything we've gone through, I was like,
Mhm,
there's no way that both of us can go down. Like our children need at
mm,
least one parent. So
mhm,
I have a lot of nerves with that. So I haven't flown yet.
mhm.
He's flown his dad and one of our sons, and yeah, he's enjoying it.
That's awesome. Okay, so then you have the three boys then. So it's
Mhm.
Hunter, and then what are the names of your other two?
Cade and Logan.
Oh, beautiful. Cade with a K or with a C?
A C. It has
Sorry,
different
I need to
meanings,
see it.
different
Oh,
roots.
really?
Yeah.
Tell me. What does the C with the C
So
mean?
with the C, because we always look at the meanings of names, with the C, it
Yes.
means a spirit of battle. So,
Beautiful.
and he's a feisty little guy, so it totally fits him.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I know I love names and meanings, and
Hmm.
even before I had kids, like I would just like look at name books, like I
Yeah.
just liked, looking at all that. So that's awesome. Now, for you then, being that you're an artist as well, a crafter, what kind of crafts do you do? You're a musician. What could tell us about that? What is these artistic expressions that you have? How do you express these?
Yeah, I just love to create. Like I just love to make things and right now my biggest crafting is storytelling with being a writer. I feel like I've dabbled in so much. Like I went through like a scrapbooking period where I would make these super elaborate scrapbooks with like so many embellishments and pictures. And then I had a fundraiser for Hunter called Wreaths for Hunter that I'm still kind of doing, but I would make these really beautiful floral wreaths. Um, Anything that I can do to create, whether it's writing music or storytelling or anything, I just love doing it. I just have my mind is just always wanting to create.
In the artistic space. Yeah, that's
Mhm.
kind of where my juices kind of flow as well in that. Not in the tactile way. My
Mhm.
artistic expression is even this, a podcast, or I studied theater. So it's
Mm.
that's kind of where it flows. Now let's talk about then when you guys started your family and be getting, expecting Hunter. Like how was it when you guys started your family and the that journey of parenthood 11 years ago?
Yeah, man, just thinking about it just makes me so
Mm.
happy because I knew I always wanted to be a mom. I knew I always wanted that to be just like the biggest part of my life. I'm a stay-at-home mom and I wouldn't have it any other way. I mean, I do have a lot of side projects and I do teach music on the side and so I definitely stay busy outside of motherhood, but I was always my dream to be a stay-at-home mom and it took us a little bit to get pregnant with Hunter. It took us about a year, which in the long run a year isn't that long, but when you're like I'm ready. I'm ready to be a mom right now. I feel like every
I
month
can relate.
that cycle comes, it's like a little bit
That's a grief
heartbreaking.
journey itself. That's
It
a
is,
grief journey in
yes.
itself. I know. I was telling a friend too, I'm like that it's like I can't even imagine like even people that go through like adoption process or any of
Uh-huh.
these other things that also like there's this aspect of grief every single time, like every month.
Yes.
Oh man, it didn't happen this month, like
Yeah.
with being pregnant. So I can relate to that as well. Man, yeah.
Yeah.
So a year felt like an eternity be in your
Yes.
mind.
Yeah. And when we finally got pregnant, I was just so excited. I had a great pregnancy and labor was pretty average and we gave birth to our first son and that was Hunter. And um man, I loved it. I loved every aspect of it. And we knew that we wanted our kids to be somewhat close. I'm like, let's shoot for 2 years apart. We didn't know exactly how many one we wanted. Michael comes from a family of four, and I come from a
Mhm.
family of two. And so I was like, I don't. Four seems kind of big, and two's too small. We ended up
Compromise.
meeting in the middle. Michael didn't want three at first, but that was a journey too. But so I got pregnant when my son was just they would have been exactly 2 years apart. And then we found out about almost halfway through the pregnancy that she wasn't going to make it.
Mm,
And um, that was one of my very first experiences having very, very deep grief,
grief. Mm,
which is what I really feel like prepared me for what we went through with my son Hunter.
okay. Sorry to hear about your daughter.
Yeah.
Um, then with what was how old was Hunter, or when you what happened then? What is his disability, or what is it? I don't even know that part. Can you believe it?
Yeah, yeah.
I-
So when he was 4, and so yeah, so we had lost the baby, and then I had my second boy, and then when my second boy was about a little over 18 months, so
Mhm,
he was still a toddler. My son got in an accident, and he our dog attacked him. It was our police dog at the time, and
mm.
it was so bad that they ended up having to amputate his leg.
Oh wow,
So that
wow.
just, I mean, it changed our lives.
Oh, I'm following your son on Instagram. I'm following your account.
Yeah,
I
thanks.
am. I'm like
Thank
now
you.
that I'm like, wait a minute, I am. He is so. You guys do a whole lot little TikTok videos and those kind of things, right?
Yeah, all the time. Yeah,
Yes,
we just made
yes.
one
Okay,
this
like
morning.
the
Yeah,
reels. Okay, wait. I'm like, as you're
yeah,
saying, I'm like, wait. And as you were talking, I'm like, I wonder if that's what I'm following. But you see, I didn't
yeah.
even put two and two together as I'm like,
That says.
what's his IG account? What is the IG account that you guys
So
post?
it's my last name. It's Mass Taylor Party of Five, and
Mass Taylor Party.
the number
Party of
five.
five.
Hmm.
Okay, okay.
Yeah,
Um, so this happens. I I can't even imagine because I have two dogs myself.
hmm,
So that part of even just the grieving your even the component of this other, being that was in your home
yeah.
too, that so can you kind of take us through that and the emotional component of having that occur? uh,
Yeah. Regarding
With
specifically
it
the dog,
with the
or
dog, yeah,
so the
with the
dog, he wasn't a family dog. He was a working
oh,
dog.
okay.
He was a police dog. He lived with us, and that was about it. There were very, very strict rules, and he was my husband's partner, and that was about it. I mean, he was there, and we had to just, he was a working dog. He wouldn't be in the home with us. He would just make a short trek from his kennel, which was outside, straight to the police unit. But he had lived with us for a year, so he was
Mhm.
definitely a part of the home, just not in a sense of like a
Okay,
family dog.
got it, got it.
Hmm.
Okay. So you go into the hospital. Was it something immediate that you knew that that was going to be the case, that he was going to lose his leg, was going to be amputated, or was it a process of nerves not working? What was that
Yeah.
journey?
So for me, I wasn't home when it happened. So I didn't see the condition of his leg right away. Um, and so when my husband called me and told me what happened, he didn't give me any specifics. He just said, Django bit Hunter, get home right now. And in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, it was probably a little snap. He probably just needs stitches. Like literally in my mind, that is what I'm thinking. And we had to go back and forth a little bit with phone calls. And then finally, I hear some people in the background, and I was like, who is with you? Like, why are there people at our house? And he's like, it's the paramedics, Rosalie. They're here. They're taking care of Hunter. And I'm like, wait a second. Like, no, it can't be that bad that you had to
Hmm.
call 911, and there are now, it's an emergency. And um, he, and then I heard him say, he goes, where are you landing the bird? And that's when I knew that they were lifelining him to the
Oh my
hospital.
gosh.
And that's that's when I started to panic. Because I knew, like, my child's life is in danger. I don't know how bad it is. I just know that this dog, this very powerful dog who was trained to bite, um, my son is now, his life is in danger. So I get to the airport as soon as possible, and that my husband, he ran up to the truck basically right away before I even got to Hunter, and I have never seen him look how he looked in that moment. Just so much pain and guilt and suffering and devastation. And I just remember like holding his face and just telling him that I loved him and that I wasn't going to blame him. And then I got to Hunter right away, and we took the helicopter to the hospital. Um, at that point, still, I felt like he this is going to get fixed. Like, we are in 2015, our medical technology is the best it's ever been, and this is going to get fixed. They're going to do whatever they can to fix him, and he's going to be healed. And we're going to walk out of that hospital like nothing happened. And like in my mind, I don't feel like I was being irrational. I just felt like I had so much hope and so much faith that that's what was going to happen. I was going to be granted a miracle. And we rushed to the hospital, and I'm just standing there as they're working on him, and I knew they were going to have to get him into surgery. And hadn't really seen the leg at that point, because he, by the time I got to him, he was all bandaged up for the most part. And then one of the surgeons called me over, or like an intern, so I could um, sign the consent form. And he's going through everything, and everything just sounds like gibberish. I don't remember anything he said. He's just going down, okay, we're going to do this, 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 and this. I'm like, okay, I don't care what you're going to do. Just do it and fix my son. Just get him in surgery, put him in a cast, fix his bones. Like, this is going to be fine. And then at the bottom of the consent form, he says, and if it comes down to it, we're going to amputate his leg.
Mm.
And I, they had to catch me. I almost fell over. And then they sat me down, and I just remember scribbling my name and just thinking, there's no way that it's going to come to that. There's no way my son is going to lose a part of his body. Um, and to this day, obviously, like that part just always, I just remember being so hopeful. And so they didn't amputate his leg right away. They rushed him into surgery, and they put some pins in his bones, and a big contraption around it. And but they told us, what happens with pediatric veins is they have an elasticity to them, which actually saved his life, because when that dog was ripping at his leg, basically those veins closed up and those arteries closed up, so he didn't bleed out.
Mm.
But because they closed up, the blood flow was not
Didn't go
able to
through the rest of
return.
the like.
And
Mm.
after 3 days of hoping the blood flow would return, I just remember they checked it every hour. They would check for a pulse on the bottom of the foot. And I just remember every hour just being so intent and listening. Please be a pulse, please be a pulse. And we would just
Mm.
listen, listen, listen. And then it just never came. And by the third day, his foot was black and blue. And that's when we knew it's part of his legs got to go.
Mm. Wow. I just, am seeing all this movie playing in my head as you're describing all this. It's like reliving it through you as you're sharing.
Mhm.
Even though I didn't live it, it's like I can't even imagine the type of emotions that come up. And how did you um, tell him, or did the doctors explain to him when that decision was made? Remind us, he was 4. You said
Yeah, he was four
he
years
was
old.
4.
Mhm.
How do you explain to a 4-year-old that process of what's coming? And was it you? Was it the
So
doctor?
there was no preparing him, because
Mm-hmm.
he was in so much pain.
Mm,
They had to semi sedate him. So it
mm-hmm.
was the matter of him going off to surgery and then him waking up and his leg being gone. So there wasn't a way that we could prepare him. I mean, we could have tried, but I used my best judgment. I'm like, he's not gonna be able to
Reason it
rationalize,
at
yeah,
that moment.
reason
Yeah, yeah,
this,
yeah.
yeah.
Right. Yeah.
He'd probably, he'd never seen someone without a limb.
Mhm.
Um, so how is he gonna process that?
Mhm.
So he wakes up and he was pretty loopy, and we took him to his bed, and it was just like, okay, when do we tell him? We were just trying to keep him comfortable, and he didn't really figure it out until we lifted him up and he saw it himself.
Mm.
And looking back, I mean, there's all the woulda, shoulda, couldas. We maybe
Mhm.
could have talked with him, but Hunter was not a very conversational child.
Mm.
He just wasn't. He loved to play. He was very noisy. He was very loud, but we didn't, vocabulary was not his strong suit. And
Mhm.
so I just felt like we're just going to kind of let this play out. Um, and he was our first child too. We weren't like the best at communicating, so I don't feel like we made a mistake, but he finally saw it, and that's when he's just started screaming like, my foot, where's my foot? And we just calmed him down, and even then it took days and months for him to finally realize my leg is never coming back.
Mm. Did he have those, like, phantom pains that they say a lot of people have when they
So
don't have a limb?
right. Luckily, because he was so young, I think that is a big problem with either older children or adults, because their body is just, those wires are
So
just
used.
so much
Yeah, yeah.
stronger.
Mhm.
So he did not have those issues, thank goodness. The pain
Mhm.
wasn't bad. Um, I feel like he was able to heal physically very
Mhm.
quickly. Mentally and emotionally was the very long process.
Oh, yeah. I
Yeah.
could've. Okay. So this happens, you already at that point, yeah, you just had 2,
Hmm.
right? Your mom 2. Your youngest was just less
Over
than
a
2
little over
years old.
18. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, less than 2 years old. You're now not only having to help your little one who's probably
Hmm.
just early walker, now you have your 4-year-old who is now also needing now help with
Right.
getting around. How did you all juggle all this, like, the emotions plus the doing?
Mhm,
Like, it is
mhm.
just how did you have family around? What was the what let's go and let me say more specifically. What were the tools or who were your people t
Yeah, yeah.
helping? Who was that tribe around you supporting you as a family?
Yeah, I would say immediately, luckily, my mom and Michael's mom are both nurses. So when it came to him coming home from the hospital because it was a dog bite, there was infection, like he had to still have a lot of medicine, and he had like a pick line in. For those who don't know, it's basically like almost like an IV running, like I think close to the heart. I'm not entirely sure,
Mhm.
but it's a way for us to administer medicine through, in a sense, like an IV from home. And so luckily I don't do all of that stuff. My mom is, she was called to be a nurse. Michael's mom was there, that's their calling in life. And so they helped to kind of nurse him back to health medical wise. I had a really good friend who actually, when we went to the hospital initially, she took my son, and it was between her and another friend, but she took him right away, and she basically was his mom for that time when we were in the hospital, because I couldn't do it. I could not be a mom to 2 at the time, and I had to accept that because I needed to be there for Hunter, and luckily I knew my friends were gonna step up and be able to offer the love to my son that I couldn't give at the time, and the attention and the affection, and so they did that. Um, and then further down the road, we ended up having this community that I never ever in my life thought I would have, which is the amputee and disabled community. And it wasn't until we connected with them. His accident happened in February. We went to our first camp in June. And it wasn't until I connected with them that everything started to feel like that we could do it. We can do
Mm.
this. We can handle all of this. And honestly, you don't realize like what you can do until you have to do it.
Oh,
And when you
yeah.
asked me that question, "How do you do it?" I almost wanna be like, "I don't know. I don't entirely know." I just know that
That's true.
there was all these little things, but I would definitely say the community part of it, and also the community part that supported Hunter. is
Mm.
what helped so much, because if I knew that he had the support he needed,
Mhm.
then that would help me to know he's going to be okay. He is okay. And it's because of this community that I am introducing him to and offering to him.
That is so true. What you said a couple things that ring really true to me. Community is huge, right?
Hmm.
Community support. I just did an event not long ago, and I was talking about like when we're going through changes in our life, like one of the things that's so important is finding community. And if we don't have it in our own circle, is reaching out to others that we can relate, that
Yes.
we can that relate to what we're going through,
Hmm.
because it's so important to feel heard and seen, and to know somebody else that's gone through that. So that's
Yeah.
so great that you had those resources. Now, the fact of course that you used your family, you used, it sounds that your family stepped in, your mom
Yeah.
and your mother-in-law to help you out, and then your friends as a resource. You also knowing and realizing the parts that you knew at that moment you were not going to be able to do 100%, which was like
Hmm.
the take is it Cade, right? Cade's the
Yeah.
middle one.
Cade.
Okay.
Hmm.
So taking care of Cade, um and kind of assigning that to somebody else for those, a few months, as or weeks or whatever it was, that in that moment as you're trying to realizing that takes a lot of courage to do.
Yeah.
Uh a lot of courage to do, and realizing where we are lacking kind of, or
Yeah.
what the things we can't do in order to assign somebody else to do while we're in that. So kudos to you for that. And like you said, you don't know how you did it, but you did it. Like those were just the decisions you kind of went along. You probably didn't even rationalize that you were doing that, but that
Right.
takes a lot. Um, Now let's talk about his process of also then, getting then prosthetics. That
Hmm.
whole journey of being able to learn how to walk with a prosthetic, and that journey, and then how, because of what I see on Instagram, this is that energy boy that you mentioned, that he was, and maybe not the best communicator, but definitely energetic and joy. That's what I see in these videos. Very
Hmm.
inspiring, uh joyful child. So 4 years of this journey for him. No, 8 years of this journey.
Yeah.
Oh
So
my
we
goodness,
just
because he's 11.
had
7 years, 7 years.
actually, yeah, it's been 2015. Yeah, we just celebrated on February 8th, so just a few weeks ago. We call it his Alive Day. And so the
Mm.
anniversary of the accident, we let him pick whatever he wants for dinner, and I have a cake for him, and we
He's
kind of
alive.
reminisce, and it's looked different every year. Every year, we'll bring up different things, and some years he's needed more encouragement of like, hey, this is your life, I want, what are you grateful for? And some years it's like, cool, this is it, and we're just casually doing it. The first year was definitely really tough, and then I feel like it leveled out, and then we he got a little older and more aware of how different he was, and that's when
Mm.
it got hard again, and that's where we really had to teach him to communicate so that he could express his feelings, because he was expressing them in ways that weren't healthy. There was a lot of anger, and he would pull out his hair, and there was a lot of anxiety. He was about 7-ish when we kind of went downhill. Right after the accident, like I had said, that it took him a long time to process the leg being gone. There, that whole process was very excruciating, because it just felt like he thought his leg was going to come back. And he would ask me, like, Mommy, can we go to the hospital? Can we go to the backyard? Um, he just wanted his leg back, and I couldn't give it to
Mm.
him, which was
Mm.
very, very, it was just, like I said, it was excruciating. And there were times when we would just hold each other and just cry and cry and cry. And I mean, there was one point where he even said, like, why did God let this happen? Like,
Mhm.
I would rather be dead than have lost my leg. And of
Mm.
course, he does not even realize what he's saying, but in his little mind, that's where he was. And
Mhm.
so to get him through that was just a lot of, I'm going to let you feel, and I'm going to feel with you, and we're just going to push forward. And like I said, it took a few months that he finally met his community. And that's when I was like, okay, I'm able to see that these kids are okay. And I just have to keep supporting him through this. And it took him quite some time to accept his prosthetic leg. It took 8 months from the time he lost his leg to the time he took his first step. And though it was a very long 8 months, he hated his prosthetic leg. We even saw like this world renowned prosthetist, and he was so good with kids. And he's like, "Hey, can you just put your leg on?" And he just would just freak out. Like, and he was like, "Oh my gosh." And so he's like, "Just put it away. Just put it away." Like,
Mhm.
this kid, for some reason, is just hating. It's almost like he didn't want to accept this new life. And that prosthetic
Mhm.
leg meant my leg's never coming back. I don't want to accept it. And the more that I fight it, maybe I will get my old life back.
Mm.
And it's just a long process.
Wow. Yeah, because it's as if he did put it on, it was already accepting the
Yeah.
reality of it, and that was, like, hard for him. Thank you for
Hmm.
sharing that journey because, yeah, it's not like we talk about all this aspect, and you even said it in the bio, that you sent me, navigating this and joy in finding joy in the journey, but,
Hmm.
that takes there's a lot of ugliness in the middle, a lot
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
hardship and so forth. It doesn't just happen like that. And a lot of times when we see someone's life, we just see that moment and that,
Right.
the present, and we don't realize how much has gone through to get them to where they are.
Yeah, just how far, just like truly how far he's come. And like you said, so we started making videos. It's been just a little over a year and a half that we really started making videos. And I feel like he had to get to a point where he was confident enough for it. And it all kind of started because I started this writing journey of being at of this point of healing, to where I felt like I can write our journey now because I've gotten more to the other side. I've been through some healing. We are recovered. And so I started writing our story as a memoir. And then once I was done with that, it was like, okay, well, you need a platform if you want to even try and sell this memoir. I was like, okay, well, what the heck is a platform? And so I started diving into that, and I was like, oh, it's basically like TikTok. And so that was right around the time Instagram started rolling
The
out their
reels.
version of TikTok and their videos. I was like, okay, we can do this. And it took some time for us to like figure out what do we want to share. But we finally got to the point where like I'm like, what can I offer my
Mm,
audience? What can I teach them? What is going to help them? What is going to bring the most awareness? And that's when it really started to take off. The video that really took off was of Hunter stepping on Legos. And he said, we give credit to Hunter Woodhall, who is a kind of a famous Paralympian who's an amputee. He said, "Oh, my next video, I'm going to be stepping on Legos." And I was like, "Hunter, we got to do this before him, and we got to show him." And so we made this really quick video. It took like 30 seconds to make. And he's like, "I'm missing my leg. No big deal. Watch this." And then he steps on Legos and it went viral. And I was like, oh my gosh, people love this. People love seeing that, oh, he's missing his leg, but he's making something funny out of it.
mhm,
So we try and do that and bring a lot of humor into it, and a lot of joy. And now he's just so confident with it. And it's so amazing. To see people reach out to me and say, I'm learning so much from you. And like you said, even one person, I posted a video the other day about how I prayed for a miracle and I didn't get it because I prayed Hunter's leg would be saved.
mm,
And someone wrote on there, I needed to hear that today. I was like, I
mm,
wouldn't care if that was the only comment on there or if it was
mhm,
one view. That was worth it. That was worth
mhm.
it. And so
Yeah.
that's where we are today.
That's where you are today. And that aspect of praying for a miracle, sometimes too, we think that what we want, and I know because even from your bio, that religion and spirituality and faith are a big part of your life, that
Hmm.
we think that what it is we want and the miracle we're praying for is going to be answered in that way. And that when it's
Hmm.
not answered in that way is as if it was not answered.
Yeah.
Yet somehow the universe and life starts showing us that it actually was answered, just not we just didn't see it like what
Hmm.
it was. Just the fact that he is alive already is a miracle in itself. But it's hard to see those things in that
Yeah.
in that moment, right? In the thick of it,
Yeah.
of seeing
Because,
things with perspective. Yeah.
right. Because who wants, I mean, who, who would pray for anything different, to be honest? What
Hmm.
mother? would
Mhm.
pray for anything different than for their
Right.
child to not lose their leg. And
Mhm.
it was a big lesson for me to learn about prayer and about faith. And
Mhm.
it's, I had heard, do you have enough faith to ask for a miracle, but do you have enough faith if you don't get that miracle?
Mm.
And that was where I felt like there was a miracle too, that I didn't lose my faith and that I was still able to trust in God enough to know that this was our journey, that this was our plan. And now seeing where we're at today, I wouldn't change anything.
Mm.
When there's bad days, of course, I'm like, man, that sucks. I wish he didn't
Mhm.
have to lose his leg. But there's so much good, and our lives with how they look right now. I mean, they wouldn't, and the people that we know too. That's the
Yes.
big thing. The people we know because of being in this community has changed my life, has made me into so much of a better person,
Mm.
that's one thing I would never change.
So everything that you are saying to oh my gosh, I'm like thinking even just the amount of mindset work that you have to have
Mhm.
as a mom to then be able to then life coach your child through all this. So
Yeah,
let's talk
yeah.
about that because you're talking about the community being like, you're talking about who you are right now. You wouldn't
Mhm.
be had you not had this community. Is that where you got a lot of your resources in order to also work on that aspect of that mindset and being able to have the tools to then have help your child navigate this new way in which life was going to look like for him and your
I
family?
feel like, I've been with the community, I'm able to gain education regarding what an amputee needs, um, regarding prosthetics and, resources of grants and all those, like, logistics.
Mhm.
Um, with being a life coach, I don't know where that came from. Um I just feel like one of the biggest things that I've learned and that I, like, stay so true to, and I had mentioned before, is just letting him feel. And also he went to therapy for a little bit too, and I think the one thing that I really learned from that is really learning how to communicate with each other.
Mhm.
And that has been really huge because the minute I know something's off or something's wrong, I just try and get him to express himself and get him to talk, and then we can be open and have a conversation about it. And that's actually one of the things that we really push for on our platform is with children who, this is a little bit of a segue and a little bit off topic, but like children who are scared of people who have disabilities or just think it's weird or are freaked out by it. The parent needs to learn how to communicate with them and learn how to get them to open up, so there can be this open communication instead of, "Hush, don't say that, that's rude."
Mhm.
Like,
Uh-huh.
that I mean, there was a kid yesterday that was at my house, and he saw a book that we have of a little boy who doesn't have his leg on it, and he's just like, "That's scary." I was like, "Nope, it's not,
Mhm.
it's just different." And
It's
he
just different.
yeah, and he would
Different is
not
the
let
way.
it go, and I was like, "Okay, I'm just
Mhm.
gonna try and get him to keep talking about it so we can just keep this conversation open." And, oh man, I really wish that happened more with parents.
You said something that just reminded me even of how I am. I am somebody that just says what comes up to mind, and
Mm.
sometimes that I end up literally putting my foot in my mouth. Like I know that analogy right now would be, not, but, at the one of the pharmacies, it's just gentleman I always see, he's the one at the cashier, and I see him all the time. I'm like, "Oh, hi," and his name's Ken, and so, because 'cause I'm Ken Dry, I always I'm like, "Hey, your name's half of my name." I'm like, 'cause, and then, talking, and then one day, we're, like, going through there, and then all of a sudden, he was, because sometimes he's standing, I don't remember, but then all of a sudden, I'm like, I saw he had a prosthetic on his leg, and I was like, I literally went, "Ken, how come how I had never seen that you had a prosthetic." Like, I just was full on, like, straight up, I just said it. I
Uh-huh.
acknowledged, I didn't, like, pretend like I had it. I was like, "I didn't know. I had not noticed it." And so he was like, "Oh, yeah." And I'm like, "Did it happen recently? Like, or is it something you were born with?" I just ask I ask questions. It's like, "Oh, no, it's like 3 years ago," and I'm like, "Oh, and how have you," is it like so, and I just start a conversation because
Mhm.
I it is more uncomfortable to pretend, one, that
Mhm.
you're not seeing what you're seeing, I
Mhm.
think, right? And not ask, but also let's talk about this. What are the ways in which some of the kids or people have approached you or Hunter in a way that you know that it's inquisitive
Mhm.
and coming out of really wanting to learn, like me, like with Ken, that it was really just me like, "Oh, I didn't realize,"
Mhm.
that it's not coming out of, you know, um, fear, that's coming out of, learning.
Yes. Oh gosh, that is such a good question, and I feel like that is like such a multi-layered question because I think it's different when it comes to adults and kids. But okay, so
Mhm.
when we first got into this world, we were kind of like, oh, we want to support the just ask narrative. Oh, instead
Yes.
of staring or anything, just ask. Like, just send up your kid to my kid and just ask. But then I
But
started digging into it a little bit
true.
more and listening to
Mm.
other people who are disabled. That is where I have learned the most. I follow quite a few people, quite a few adults on
Mhm.
Instagram who I admire so much. One of them is a writer, one of them is just an avid content creator. And I just listen to them and it just makes
Mhm.
sense. And it's kind of like instead of sending your kid up to my kid to just ask, why don't you have a conversation with them as the parent and
Yes.
just have your kid play with my kid? and so they can just be introduced to it. And so it's really hard because we want to educate
Mhm.
people, we want them to be aware, and how else are they going to learn? But at the same time, don't use my kid as a learning experience of like
Mm.
sending them up to my kid. And the perfect example is we were in San Antonio and for the weekend just for fun. And in the matter of that weekend, we had one parent like really hush their child harshly. We walked into two different stores, and both times the person behind the counter asked him how he got the prosthetic leg or something like that. And I'm like, my kid just wants to enjoy his ice cream. He just wants to go
Mm.
in and get his ice cream and not feel like the only thing they're looking at is the leg. And so
Uh-huh.
there is, I feel like a gray
A
area.
balance. It's like a
Yes.
balance between the 2. Like,
Yes.
mine already had a relationship with,
Exactly.
like, you know what I mean? This was somebody I was seeing all the time.
Yes.
It was just suddenly, "Wait a minute, I had not noticed."
Yes. And that's
Like,
the difference, Kendra. That's the difference. And
yeah.
I think
Mhm.
that's one of the big things. And if you ask Hunter, and if you say, okay, do you mind if someone asks you questions? And he's kind of like, no, like, cause he's
Mhm.
in this world. And I said, okay, well, would you rather a stranger ask you a question or a friend ask you a question? And he said, a
Mm.
friend.
Friend.
I'm like,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
that's like hitting the nail on the head. Is he doesn't want to be out in public and have strangers ask him questions so they could appease their curiosity. And
Mhm.
especially because he lost his leg because of trauma. And so we're in the ice
Mm.
cream store and they're like, "Oh, how did you get that?" Well, let me tell you about how this dog
Right.
attacked me and lost my leg. And I think
Right, right,
that's
right.
where it comes from. We don't know how people became disabled, whether it was trauma, whether it was congenital, whether it was last
Mm.
week. Do we want to try and bring up this trauma? And I feel like the ones that are congenital, it's such this isn't saying that they live a different life by any means, but it is a different answer opposed to
Mm.
saying, "Oh, I had to go through
The
this
trauma.
trauma
Mhm.
to get through it."
Yeah.
And I feel like it's a way to protect that trauma community.
Mhm.
Um, and there's people who are congenital who might say the same thing too. So it's really
Mhm.
tough. But I think the biggest thing that we can encourage people to do is ask and say, "Are you okay with me answering these questions?" And I'm trying to teach Hunter to say, "If you're not, just say no."
Mhm.
And because
Mhm.
when people do ask me, he kind of looks at me if he's with me. And I mean, there was this one time, sorry, I'm going off a little bit, but this is something I'm
No,
so
no, no, no,
passionate about.
no. Please,
But we were at the
please.
park one time and he's just standing there at the swings pushing his brother or something. And there was this kid who was relentless and he was like, "What happened to your leg? Why is your leg like that?" Like he would not stop asking. And Hunter was so awesome because I just watched. I was like, I'm really curious to see how this plays out because he's older now and I'm not at the playground with him anymore at school.
Mhm.
And Hunter just ignored him. And I was like, that's fine. If, and
Mhm.
people will say, "Oh, that's rude." And it's like, no, this is his life. Those are his boundaries. And this kid won't stop asking. He doesn't have just because someone has a disability doesn't mean they owe it to everybody what their story is. And I think that's the biggest thing. Like, and people think
Ooh.
Oh,
Repeat that, repeat that again,
okay.
please.
So just because someone has a disability doesn't mean they owe everyone around him what their story is. They don't have to answer to people. And I feel like in this day and age of, oh, we need to be polite, we need to be nice. And there's the coined term of a nice disabled person. Oh, let me answer all your questions. But then shouldn't they be able to live their life how we do? They already live their life so differently. So why do they have to answer people's curiosities? They're not a curiosity. That was back when they had freak shows. Hunter would have been a part of a freak show back in the day when they had these freak shows and they were considered curiosities. That is not what they are. If you want to educate yourself, there are many ways to do that besides asking my kid when he walks into an ice cream shop.
That is like, choo-choo.
Mic drop.
Woo. Mic drop. Yes, literally. Like I got chills because it is so so true. Like just like the perspective that you are sharing, and I'm learning as I'm going through because I do end up being somebody that just kind of like a child. That lens is sometimes not there, and mine because it's coming literally from like this good place. It's
Hmm.
at that aspect still of not knowing what you mentioned before. Do you want to have the other person relive that trauma that
Yeah.
they've just experienced as they're sharing? And that is it is huge.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for that.
I do
Now
want to
let's
say
mm,
really quick though,
mm,
when it comes to people in wheelchairs or they have these mobility aids, if someone came up to Hunter and was just like, "Hey, man, your leg is so cool," that is totally okay.
mhm,
It doesn't need to be ignored per se,
mhm,
but um, I've had people like come to me and be like, "Can I tell your kid that I love his leg?" I'm like, "Go ahead."
mhm,
That is
mhm,
so much better than be like,
mm,
"Hey, let me dig into your medical history and find out how you became
mm,
disabled."
mhm. Because then that you're right. It's more like for ourselves. It's like ourselves appeasing our own
Yeah,
curiosity rather than really it being about the other person. It's like
right.
our own inquisitive mind. That's why reality shows are so popular, right? Because people
Uh-huh.
are so like curious about why,
Right.
people is like, well, I am too. That's why I have podcasts and ask questions. I
Right,
just
right.
invite people to this space so that I can ask them.
Well, I mean, and it's
that's
such a
that's my
thing.
way.
Right, exactly. And it's such a thing within the disabled community. It's like it's become this social norm to ask disabled people questions. It's if
Mm,
someone was bald, would you say, "Hey, how did you lose your hair?" No one's going to do that. Or like if someone was pregnant and the child was like, "Whoa, why is your belly like that?" Oh, just ask. Just go up to her and ask her why. Like, but if they have a disability, go ahead because that is the world we live in. Ask a
mm,
disabled person anything you want because it is
mm,
they are our teachers, but that is not the narrative that
mm.
we support education and awareness, and it almost seems counterproductive, but it's not. We're just trying to teach people how to do it, and
How? The
I
how?
I
Yeah.
hope that sometimes I feel like we get attacked a little bit, like, "Oh, were you telling us not to ask questions yet you're here on Instagram?" I'm like, you're not.
Mm.
You don't get it."
That's different because you're choosing what it is you're sharing. That's
Right.
very different. It's your platform. You're choosing what you're sharing.
Yeah.
And just because you're in that social space, it still doesn't mean that it's just allowing people to just, you know what I mean? Like to just say whatever.
Yeah.
So no, yeah, it is different. Now let's then dive into what it is you guys do and your book that you're writing and all this
Yeah.
things and how people are going to be able to find you. We could probably talk a whole other hour because
Yeah.
I still want to go like even deeper into the whole like how do you navigate a child, your child,
Yeah.
helping them with that process. But yeah, so tell us about that, about
Yeah.
the book.
So the exciting stuff, we are actually just about to launch pre-orders for the ebook next week. We are doing a cover reel this weekend. So this is like real time, real life right now. Our book is coming to life. And so this first book that is coming out is called Hunter's Tall Tales. And there's another book that is out there that is very similar that I love, and the author is great. And if you want to learn more about disabilities, follow they're called the catch poles, like catch and then fishing pole with an S, the catch poles. He wrote a book, and when it came out, I was like, oh my gosh, I think this book is so similar to mine. But basically, we're supporting the narrative of um, of don't just ask. And so it's basically Hunter, he goes to his first day of school and all these kids are asking him questions and he's making up these crazy stories. That's why it's called Hunter's Tall Tales. And then
Mm.
finally, a kid, he approaches a kid and in his mind he's thinking, okay, here comes more questions. And then he asks the question that leaves Hunter totally speechless. And he says, "What's your name?" And that's it. And he didn't ask any other
Oh,
questions and he said, "I'm Hunter. Let's play soccer." And that was,
that's awesome.
and then all of a sudden all these other kids join in. And that's the message that we want to share with that book. We also have another book that Hunter is co-authoring with me. It's a nonfiction book. We have 30 famous people who are disabled. They're artists, athletes, activists. We have a sailor, we have singers, we have an um, extreme wheelchair
Sport.
guy.
Mhm.
And it's all of their bios in one place with beautiful artistry from the illustrator Brant Day, who is my illustrator. And we came up with the idea of this book because we love our community so much that we want to tell everybody about the people in this community. And what what is driving me to do that is that I feel like every household has different names in their household, household names, whether it be celebrities or authors or whatever. We want people who have disabilities to be household names. And I just feel like right now there isn't enough. How many people know about Eric Weinmayer, who was the first blind man to summit Mount Everest? He's like one of our
Mm.
heroes. He was just on a show on Disney Plus. Or Mandy Harvey, who is profoundly deaf and is a professional singer. She literally can hear nothing, yet she has a voice of an angel somehow.
Mhm.
There's all these amazing people. It's like we're among giants. And how many people do we really know about? And so that is our
Mhm.
goal and our mission, to tell people about these people. Some of them are from the past, most of them are living, and we have some people from around the world. And we just want to tell you all about them. So that book is called Represent, Volume One, and that is, like I said, being co-authored with Hunter. He has helped me pick all the people, and we are researching them all the time. So yeah.
Love it. So he's a co-author. Imagine co-authoring
Hmm.
at his age.
I
That he
know.
can add that to his list. That is so awesome. That's so awesome. So many amazing things. Now, how can people reach you? How can people find you?
Yeah, so I have a website, and the website, I work so hard on the website. I have a whole page of books that have, they all feature a disabled character. So I have probably one of the largest databases you can find online, at least from what I've found so far. So if you go to my website, which is my name, rosaliemastaler.com, we really want to encourage people to read books that have disabled characters. So you can find that on there. And also, we have resources for libraries and independent bookstores to celebrate Disability Pride Month, which is in
Mm.
July, to display books by disabled authors or that have disabled characters in them. That's huge. No one's doing that. Like, very few people are doing that.
Mm.
So we're really pushing for that. We hope to see a change in that. So my
Yeah, just like they did the Black History Month and all the people supporting
yes,
different also so the same idea
yeah,
of supporting businesses or
yeah,
artistry, anything that is in this disabled community.
yeah.
That
So
is
that's
yeah.
all on my
Okay.
website, and on my website you can find links to our Instagram and my Facebook page and everything.
So one-stop shop. So I'll link your website below. One last question before we wrap up. Is there anything I did not ask you that you still want to touch up or any last words for the listeners as we all are learning how to be able to be more uh careful with our words
Hmm.
or and mindful of the disabled community. What else would you like us to learn?
Yeah, I think the best way to be an ally is to put forth an effort to just try and learn and to try and listen. I think that's kind of one of the big things in society right now. How much are we listening? How much are we going out there and looking for information? And I feel like I am unworthy almost to be in this space because I don't have the disability. I am adjacent to it. I am close to it. I am the mother of a disabled child. I do not have a disability. I can only say so much. And so everything that I learn, I try and learn from a person who is disabled. And I feel like that is the best thing that we can do. and to just have open hearts and open minds, and to realize that disability is the largest minority in the entire world. And you would never guess that with how much of a voice they have. And so we can help to amplify their voices and become better allies as we learn from them.
Wow. That is so amazing. I learned so much. I am so grateful to you and for you as well, for you being on this space. Grateful also to Diana, how we connected, somebody else I had on the podcast, and grateful for everything you've shared here, all the learnings I've had myself and my from my own my own growth,
Mm-hmm.
so that I can pass that down to also for my children too. So thank you once again, Rosalie. Again, this was Rosalie Mas, Ma,
Mastaler. I'll say it for you.
Taylor.
Mastaler.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Why I struggle. Thank you so much, so much, so much. Thank you, Rosalie Mastaler, for being on the podcast.
Thank you.
See you soon. Thank you again so much for choosing to listen today. I hope that you can take away a few nuggets from today's episode that can bring you comfort in your times of grief. If so, it would mean so much to me if you would rate and comment on this episode. And if you feel inspired in some way to share it with someone who may need to hear this, please do so. Also, if you or someone you know has a story of grief and gratitude that should be shared so that others can be inspired as well, please reach out to me. And thanks once again for tuning in to Grief, Gratitude, and the Gray in Between podcast. Have a beautiful day.